My name is Verna. I'm 32 years old. The lawyer's words felt like a punch to the gut. The entirety of the estate, he said, his voice completely flat, has been left to your sibling Alex. I just stared at him, my brain refusing to work. The room suddenly felt like it was closing in, and the expensive leather chair I was sitting in felt cold and hard. Across the table, my brother Alex did this tiny, almost invisible shrug. He had this carefully practiced look of sad surprise on his face, but it didn't reach his eyes. In that split second, I saw it, a flash of triumph he was trying to hide. I was officially cut out. Years of my brother's secret, whispered lies to our aging parents had finally hit the jackpot. But this wasn't just a story of betrayal. It was the beginning of a brutal legal fight to prove his fraud and take back my name. This fight would drag every single family secret out into the open, cost a fortune, and make me question everything I thought I knew about the people I loved. If you believe that the truth is worth fighting for, no matter what it costs, then make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell because you won't believe how this story ends. Now let's go back to where it all began, long before any lawyers got involved. On the surface, we were a totally normal family. My parents were loving, hardworking people who drilled fairness and honesty into us. As the older kid, I was the responsible one, the planner. I remembered the birthdays, made the check in calls, and handled all the logistics when my parents started needing more help. My brother Alex was my total opposite. He was the charmer, the guy who could talk his way out of anything and make everyone love him. He just had this charisma, and for years I just thought, "That's Alex." It never occurred to me that he would one day use that charm as a weapon against me. Our bond with our parents was solid, built over decades, but as they got into their late 70s, things started to change. My dad's health began a slow, heartbreaking decline, and a fog of confusion started to creep into his mind. My mom, being fiercely devoted, became his full-time caregiver. The stress just wore her down, and they both became more isolated and vulnerable than ever. That's when Alex started his campaign. It was sneaky at first, small, poisonous lies that were almost impossible to fight. He'd twist my words or reframe things I did, planting these tiny seeds of doubt. I'll never forget a phone call with my mom where she sounded so cold. "We were just disappointed you couldn't be bothered to call on our anniversary," she said. My stomach just dropped. "Mom, I did call," I told her. "We talked for 20 minutes. I even sent flowers." There was this pause, and I could hear Alex murmuring something in the background. "Well," my mom said, his influence dripping from her voice, "Alex says he was here all day and the phone never rang." It was my word against his, and more, they were choosing his. He told them I was too busy with my own life to care, that I saw them as a burden. He even made up a story that I'd called their home stuffy and old-fashioned, which completely crushed my mom, who adored that house. Every time I visited, it felt like I was being judged, like every word I said could be used against me. The last 2 years were the worst. As my dad's dementia got more severe, Alex made his big move. He quit his job, telling everyone he was going to be a full-time caregiver, and moved into my parents' house. He painted himself as the saint, the selfless son, while he systematically cut me off. My calls stopped being answered. If I tried to visit, Alex would meet me at the door with an excuse. He'd say my presence, agitated dad or mom, was too tired. He became the gatekeeper to my own parents. I was told my visits were just too disruptive. I tried to fight it, but every argument we had was twisted and used as proof that I was aggressive and selfish. I was completely trapped. I honestly thought their coldness was just a sad side effect of their health and stress. I was mourning the connection I was losing, never thinking for a second that it was being deliberately destroyed by my own brother. I had no idea it was all part of a calculated plan, a textbook case of a beneficiary isolating a vulnerable person to gain control. And I was about to find out what that cost me. Sitting in my car after leaving the lawyer's office, the shock finally wore off and was replaced by a cold, hard anger. Alex's smug face was burned into my brain. He had played the long game and he'd won. But as that first wave of betrayal and grief passed, it left something else behind. Determination. This wasn't just unfair, it felt like a crime. I refused to let his lies be the last word on my relationship with my parents. I drove straight to the office of a probate litigation attorney whose name a friend had given me months ago. The first thing my new lawyer did was manage my expectations. He was blunt. "You can't contest a will just because it's unfair," he said. "The courts automatically assume a will is valid unless you can prove it's not." That brought us to the first steps, figuring out if I had the right to sue and what my legal argument would be. As their child, I was an interested party, which gave me the legal standing to challenge the will. Next, we needed a reason. My lawyer listed off the options: lack of capacity, fraud, forgery, or undue influence. As I told him everything, how Alex isolated them, controlled their phone, and turned them against me, his expression got more and more intense. "What you're describing," he said, "is a textbook case of undue influence. That's when a beneficiary pressures a vulnerable person to change their will for personal gain." With our strategies set, we moved on to the process and, more importantly, the deadlines. My lawyer told me that in our state, there was a 2-year statute of limitations to contest a will after it's filed. The clock was ticking. Then he pointed out the scariest part. My parents' new will had an in terrorem clause. It's a no contest provision that basically says if you challenge the will and lose, you get nothing. Alex had left me a token amount, $5,000, probably on his lawyer's advice. This clause meant if I fought this and lost, I wouldn't even get that. It was a threat, designed to scare me into silence. But it was too late for that. I was all in, and so began the hunt for evidence. I went from grieving daughter to full on detective. My lawyer and I started with depositions and subpoenas. We managed to track down a home health aide who'd worked for my parents but had quit suddenly about 8 months before they passed. She was scared to get involved, but my lawyer promised to protect her, and she finally agreed to talk. She testified under oath that Alex was constantly whispering in our parents' ears, telling them I never called and was just waiting for them to die to get my hands on my inheritance. She said Alex would even take the phone off the hook for hours and then tell mom and dad that I hadn't even tried to call. Next, we subpoenaed my parents' financial records. The bank statements told a very clear story. In the last 18 months, right when Alex took over as caregiver, a series of huge financial gifts started moving from my parents' accounts to his. It was over $100,000, money they absolutely could not afford to give away. But the real smoking gun, the thing that blew the whole case wide open, came from the last place I expected. While I was cleaning out some old boxes from my parents' attic, I found a shoebox of my mother's keepsakes. Tucked inside was a stack of letters addressed to me in her beautiful, familiar handwriting. They were never sent. They were filled with her confusion and heartbreak. "Your father and I don't understand why you would say such cruel things." One letter read, "Have we been such a burden to you?" My heart broke all over again reading them. And then, at the bottom of the box, I found a folded piece of paper. It was a printed email, supposedly sent from me to a close friend. The email was disgusting, filled with complaints about my parents' health and how they were draining my finances. But as I read it, I saw it. The sender's email address, my email address, was wrong. It was misspelled by one letter. It was a clumsy, amateur forgery. Alex had faked an entire email, printed it out, and showed it to our elderly parents who, in their confused state, believed it was real. With the fake email, the aide's testimony, and the bank records, we didn't just have a hunch. We had a case. But the question was, could I actually prove in court that my own brother was this cruel? The moment we filed the petition to contest the will, the battle was on, almost on. Immediately, Alex's attorney called with a settlement offer. It was a decent amount, way more than the 5 grand in the will, but nowhere near half the estate. They were pushing hard for mediation to keep this out of court. My lawyer told me that 80% of these cases settle, saving everyone money and the emotional train wreck of a public trial. But I looked at the evidence we had: the forged email, my mom's unsent letters, the aide statement. This was never just about the money. This was about the truth. It was about clearing my name with my parents. I said no. We were going to trial. The pre-trial phase was a nightmare. During discovery, both sides have to share all their evidence, and the depositions were just excruciating. I had to sit there for hours while Alex's lawyer grilled me, trying to paint me as some greedy, absent daughter. Then I had to sit and listen while my lawyer deposed Alex. He was a true performer, spinning this whole story of his selfless sacrifice versus my neglect. He lied right to my lawyer's face under oath, and for a second, I was terrified a jury might actually fall for it. The legal fees were piling up, but there was no turning back. Finally, the trial day came. The courtroom was so formal and intimidating. Alex sat with his lawyer, looking cool as a cucumber. I felt a knot of pure dread in my stomach, but I held my head high. My lawyer started by laying out the whole sordid story for the jury, arguing this was a clear case of undue influence and fraud. He brought out our evidence piece by piece. First, the health aide took the stand. Her voice was quiet, but she was steady as she told the jury how Alex had isolated my parents and poisoned them against me. Then, a financial expert we hired showed the jury the bank statements highlighting the pattern of suspicious gifts to Alex that started the second he moved in. Then came the big moment. My lawyer put the forged email up on a giant screen for the whole jury to see. He pointed out the one-letter typo in my email address, a tiny but fatal error. He then called my friend, the one the email was supposedly sent to the stand. She testified she'd never gotten an email like that from me and that the tone was completely bizarre and unlike me. You could feel the air in the courtroom change. The jury was paying attention. The final act was my lawyer's cross-examination of Alex. He started off gently, letting Alex puff out his chest and repeat his story about being the devoted son. Then my lawyer's tone got sharp. He hit Alex with the aide's testimony. He brought up the $100,000 in transfers. Alex got defensive, and his composure started to crack. Finally, my lawyer held up a printout of the forged email. "Mr. I'll last name," he asked, his voice booming in the quiet room. "This email you showed your parents, the one that made them think their daughter was a monster. Can you tell me why her email address is misspelled?" Alex, sir, just stared at it. His face went white. He started stammering, saying it must have been a typo. My lawyer leaned in. "A typo or a fabrication? Isn't it true that you wrote this yourself to steal an inheritance you knew you didn't deserve?" And that's when he broke. Alex completely lost it, screaming that we were all conspiring against him. The mask of the devoted son shattered, and everyone in that room saw the greedy, manipulative man he really was. The jury went to deliberate. but they were back in less than an hour. The judge's words were the end of the legal war, but nothing could have prepared me for the aftermath. The judge declared the new will invalid, citing clear evidence of both undue influence and fraud. As it turns out, when a will is invalidated, the court usually reverts to the last known valid one. For my parents, that was a will they wrote together 10 years earlier. A simple, loving document that split everything equally between me and Alex. On paper, I had won. Justice was served. But the personal fallout was catastrophic. My relationship with Alex was completely destroyed. He never apologized. There was no remorse, just pure bitter rage. He accused me of destroying the family. Some of our relatives who couldn't or wouldn't believe what he'd done actually took his side. They saw me as the bad guy for airing our dirty laundry in public, but others, the ones who had seen his act for years, they rallied around me, horrified by the truth. The family was broken, maybe forever. At first, the victory felt empty. I had my inheritance, but I'd lost my brother, and my parents had died thinking horrible things about me. No court verdict could ever fix that. I grieved for the relationship we should have had in their last years. But over time, I started to see what the real victory was. It was never about the money, it was about taking back the truth. The court's decision was a public statement that the lies were just that, lies. I had fought for my parents' real wishes, for the memory of who they were before they were taken over by illness and deceit. I found peace, not in the money, but in knowing I honored them by refusing to let a lie be their final legacy. This whole nightmare cost me more than just money. It cost me 2 years of my life and an emotional price I can't even calculate, with legal fees soaring past $50,000. But in the end, I got my family's truth back, and that's priceless. The justice system isn't perfect, and it's painfully slow, but sometimes it's the only tool we have to fight back against deception. My story is proof that the truth is always worth fighting for, even if the fight is against your own blood. What would you have done? Would you have just accepted it to keep the peace in the family? Or would you have fought knowing it could tear everyone apart? Let me know what you think in the comments below. And for more stories about justice, don't forget to subscribe. Don't forget to listening.